it'll kick, it'll cure. And what I'm doing now is I'm running my hand through it. Any big lump that I feel, I'm squeezing it out of the plaster and getting it out of there. I don't feel any more lumps, but I know I've got a lot of air bubbles in it. And because air weighs less than plaster, what I can do is I can shake the container really well, and that's going to make the air bubbles pop up to the surface. So, let's give it some taps on the side, send a wave through that plaster, and you can see those bubbles coming up. I don't want to shake my table to death. I'm going to hit this off my concrete floor here a couple times. And that agitates the plaster and makes the air bubbles rise to the top. And then I pop the air bubbles with a little more water, which really won't affect my mix very much at all. Well, there's my brain. And I don't want to pour it right over top because I could trap too many air bubbles. I kind of want to pour it into one spot off to the side and allow it to fill itself up. And as it rises up, it's going to get in all those crevices. And the way I'm doing this stream, I shouldn't get too much air trapped in here. I'd rather have a nice wide flat ribbon like you get when you're pouring silicone, but that's pretty tough to get from plaster. And I'm watching it as it goes over the brain. Its viscosity is such that it's getting the detail that I want and going down into where I need it to go. And now that I can see that the clay is all the way covered, all that I want to do is get this filled up to the top. Okay, here's my full mold full of wet plaster. The bucket was lifting up a little bit despite the seal just because of the weight of the plaster. So I did a couple screws in the rim of the bucket to help hold it down, which sometimes you can strap it down using ratchet straps or whatever, so there's down force on it as well. Because my table's so wide, I really couldn't do that here. So I put a few screws down in the bucket, which are holding it onto the bench, holding it tight, and helping that silicone sealant make a seal. So that'll prevent any more blowouts. And right now, all that I'm doing is fluffing out the top here, doing a little bit of motion, trying to draw off any bubbles that are near the surface, or even a little bit deeper down, because I really don't want any bubbles in this, because that weakens the mold. The plaster has kicked. It is hard. I am unscrewing the bucket from the tabletop. Used the screws to make that seal. Alright. What I have here is the brain mold. I'm pulling all the silicone off and all that loose plaster around the sides. And right here you can see I have, that's the clay. That's the clay that made up the brain. Don't need it now, don't need it to stay in a brain shape. So I'm going to start extracting the clay from the plaster. This is an example of a wire loop tool. And it makes a nice little trench. And all that clay will just pull right on out of there. You can kind of see a bit of the brain texture in there. It's inside. And This bit here, plaster. Here, clay. You see that it's marking. That tells you that it's clay. So I got to finish picking that out. Good piece. I have most of the brain matter out. That is a negative of a brain. I'm going to clean up the clay, put that back in a bag because that's all usable. Then I will do a pour. I now have my brain mold, and I'm going to fill it up with latex. This is regular old mask latex. I want to fill it up just about halfway. Then I want to take the mold and roll it around, because what I've got in this mold, I got a lip up under here because I carved under it so it looks 3D when it sits on the table, but latex won't want to go in there because that'll store air bubbles. So by rolling it around right now, I make sure I get at least one layer of latex on it. But now I'll fill it up a little more. Do that again. Try and get those air bubbles out of there. Alright. And again, I'm vibrating it just like I did the plaster in order to get any bubbles that are in the latex to come up to the surface. Use a bit of clay to level out the mold. Then I want to put something over it so that a skin does not form on the top. And I let that sit for about 20 minutes. The longer it sits, the more the plaster will pull moisture out of the latex and the thicker the piece gets. If I want a really thick piece, I'll let it sit for an hour or two. If I want a real thin piece, 15 minutes. This here, 20 minutes will be good. It has been 20 minutes. I have allowed the latex to dwell in the mold, which makes a skin up against the plaster, and then I pour out the excess. One lip goes on the bucket edge, one goes on the stick. So I'm going to drip down the bucket, let that sit there for about 10 minutes. After draining, I have poured the excess latex out of the mold, let it drain for 10 minutes. Now I'm just letting it sit here with a fan on it. A nice open mold like this could be dry in as fast as an hour. For a mask mold where you've got a big head through a skinny neck is the only way for air to get to it, it's going to take a lot longer, like 12 hours, maybe even 24. So, but it's a nice warm evening, so I'm willing to bet in about an hour or so I'll be able to demold that.